Tycoon moved in with his mistress. Not knowing his ex-wife had taken over the mansion with triplets, there was a time when love meant sacrifice, and loyalty was paid back with silence. In a city wrapped in cold glass towers and driven by ruthless ambition, there lived a man named Daniel Hahn. To the world, he was the epitome of success, a self-made tycoon who built an empire out of nothing. They called him the Ice King in the business world. Sharp, unshakable, always in control. He wore designer suits like armor, and he walked into boardrooms like battlefields, never flinching. But behind that polished image, in the shadows of his success, there was a woman, Elena. Elena had been by Daniel's side for nearly a decade, not just as his wife, but as the one who stood in silence while he worked late into the night. The one who brewed his tea, ironed his shirts, and whispered encouragements during his darkest hours. She was always there, soft, invisible, loyal. Their marriage wasn't filled with grand gestures or candlelight dinners. Daniel never had time for that. He'd come home past midnight, loosen his tie, barely look at her and say, "It was a rough day." She would smile. "I made you soup. Sit. You need to eat." And he would, without a word of thanks. That night was no different. Rain tapped gently on the windows of their penthouse. Elena waited by the door, wearing one of her floral nightgowns, hands nervously folded in front of her. It was almost 2 a.m. when Daniel arrived. He stepped in, shoulders tense, eyes tired. Elena's smile faltered the moment she saw the lipstick stain on his collar, but she said nothing. Instead, she took his coat and whispered, "You look tired. I kept dinner warm." Daniel didn't look at her. "I already ate." There it was again, that wall, that cold, heavy silence between them. She followed him into the kitchen, pretending not to notice the perfume that lingered on his shirt. "Daniel, can we talk?" Her voice was soft, unsure. He poured himself a glass of water, sighing. "Now? I've been feeling off lately. I wanted to get a checkup. Maybe..." She paused, hesitant. "Maybe I'm pregnant." He froze for a second, then put the glass down. "Elena," he said sharply, "let's not complicate things." She blinked. "Complicate? I've been meaning to talk to you," he continued, adjusting his cufflinks. "This isn't working. We're not right anymore." Her heart dropped. "What do you mean?" "I'm filing for divorce." The words echoed in her ears like a slap. "I've met someone," he added. "Her name is Lila. She's different, passionate, alive." Elena took a step back, her knees weak. Her hands trembled, but she refused to cry. "Not yet. Is this why you've been coming home late?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't deny it. "Elena, I've given you everything. The house, stability, but I need more. I need someone who makes me feel something again." Her chest ached. She could barely breathe. "And what do I do now?" she asked, clutching the edge of the counter. "After everything?" Daniel avoided her gaze. "I'll transfer a settlement. You can stay here for a while. But I want you out by the end of the month." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, frozen. That night, Elena lay awake in her bed, listening to the rain fall harder against the windows. Her hand moved to her stomach. Was there really a life inside her? Tears streamed silently down her face. Not for him, not for the betrayal, but for the love she had poured into a man who saw her as invisible. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You are not alone, my baby. We will survive this." But the truth was, she had no idea how. Shall I continue with topic 2, following the same emotional style? Você diz. Certo? Agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a história sem marcos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Me conte sobre o tópico tu com dialogo como su faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita emoção. Com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters o chat GPT diz. Of course, here's the second part of your story, developing topic 2 with deep emotion, intimate narration, realistic pacing, and impactful dialogue, all crafted to draw the audience into Elena's internal and external world right after the devastating divorce announcement. Time passed slowly when your world had just fallen apart. The next morning, the sun rose like any other day, indifferent to the ruins left behind in Elena's heart. The penthouse that once felt like a sanctuary now echoed with silence. Daniel had left early as usual, but this time there was no goodbye. No warm coffee waiting on the table. No slippers neatly placed by the door. Just cold marble, cold air, cold emptiness. Elena sat at the edge of the bed, clutching the test in her trembling hands. 2 lines, faint but clear. She was pregnant. The tears came slowly this time. Not explosive, but steady, like a storm that had given up trying to scream. She pressed a hand against her flat belly. "You're really there," she whispered. "You chose me, even when he didn't." She should have felt joy, but instead all she felt was fear. What now? No income, no job, no family in the city. The only life she'd known was the one built around Daniel. Every room in this apartment reminded her of him. His footsteps, his laughter when they were young, the rare nights when he'd surprise her with flowers from business trips. But that Daniel was long gone. Later that evening, she forced herself to go to the lawyer's office, where everything was already prepared. Clean, cold, efficient, just like her husband. Daniel didn't show up. He had sent a legal representative. "Elena Kim," the lawyer said without emotion, "these are the divorce terms. Your husband has waived any claim to mutual assets. You will retain nothing. However, he has agreed to deposit a temporary monthly allowance until the papers are finalized." She looked at the numbers. It wasn't much. Enough to keep her from falling instantly, but not enough to stay in this lifestyle. The home? It belonged to his company. Even the car was under his name. And yet, she signed. Not because she agreed, but because she refused to beg. When she left the office, the sky had already darkened. The city lights sparkled beneath her, mocking her with their brightness. She walked aimlessly down the street, her coat too thin, her body trembling, not just from the cold, but from the crushing weight of humiliation. She found herself at the bridge where they had taken wedding photos years ago. The same spot where he kissed her forehead and promised, "I'll protect you, no matter what." She let out a bitter laugh. "What a joke," she murmured. "You promised forever, and you couldn't even give me 9 months." A sudden gust of wind blew past, causing her to grip the railing tighter. Her fingers brushed against her stomach again, instinctively. "You're not a mistake," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't care what he thinks. I don't need his money. I don't need his house. I don't need him." The next day, Elena packed what little she had. A few dresses, her wedding photo, which she tore in half and kept only her side, and the tiny sonogram from the clinic. There was nowhere to go, not really. Hotels were too expensive. Friends were few, most were business wives loyal to Daniel now. So she did the only thing she could. She went back to the outskirts of the city, to an old, abandoned house that once belonged to her grandmother. A forgotten property lost in time, left to decay after the old woman passed years ago. No one knew it existed, not even Daniel. She stood before the rusted gate with a heavy breath. The house was falling apart, the garden overgrown with weeds, and the windows clouded with dust. But for the first time in days, she felt peace. It was hers. With aching feet and sore hands, she began to clean. She scrubbed floors, fixed windows, and slept on a mattress on the floor. The days turned into weeks, and her belly began to grow, along with something else, strength. Elena took small jobs, online translations, sewing work for neighbors. She stopped straightening her hair like she used to for Daniel, and started wearing flat shoes that didn't blister her feet. She laughed again, not loudly but sincerely, when an old woman from the village brought her warm soup and told her she looked radiant. "You have that glow," the woman said. "Must be twins." Elena smiled. "I think it might be more than that. At night, She would sit by the window, looking at the stars with her hands over her belly. "Don't worry," she'd whisper to her unborn babies. "I'll be everything he refused to be. We'll build our own home. From nothing, if we have to." She never once thought about reaching out to Daniel. Even as her body grew heavier, her back ached, and her savings dwindled, she kept going. Because the pain of returning to him, to the man who didn't even ask if she was okay, hurt more than anything else. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived in the mailbox. Her grandmother's will had finally gone through. And what was inside that letter changed everything. The land she had been living on wasn't just a forgotten shack. It was part of a vast estate. Her grandmother had owned an entire historic mansion, once hidden under debt and secrecy. But the debts had been cleared, the ownership transferred. It was hers now. Tears filled her eyes as she read the paper over and over again. For the first time in months, Elena broke down. Not in despair, but in sheer disbelief. "I have something," she whispered through tears. "I have something for them." She moved into the mansion months later. It took every last cent she had, but she restored it slowly, room by room, wall by wall. And then, one cold morning in late autumn, she went into labor, alone. She gave birth to 3 perfect babies. 2 boys, 1 girl, all with soft brown eyes and the same dimple Daniel had on the right side of his smile. She held them, one by one, and said, "You will never feel unwanted. I swear to you, even if the world turns its back, I'll never let go of you." Elena stood at the top of the staircase, watching her children play in the courtyard. Jesu, the oldest by 3 minutes, loved pretending to be a knight. He wielded a wooden sword with such bravery it nearly made her cry. Minjae, the quiet one, liked to build castles with blocks, always arranging everything perfectly. And Hannah, oh Hannah, she was the smallest, the loudest, and the fiercest, just like her mother. They were everything to her. They had saved her. She still remembered every contraction, every cry from that lonely hospital room, the nurse who held her hand, the flickering ceiling light that buzzed overhead as her life changed forever. She hadn't spoken to Daniel, not once. No calls, no messages, not even a whisper of his name. She didn't need to. She had built a new life in silence, with stubbornness in her veins and fire in her chest. The village adored her. People came to her for advice, for help, for tea. She had started a small business, vintage furniture restoration, from within the mansion, and somehow it bloomed. She wasn't rich, but she was full. Then, one morning, her peace cracked. The children were napping after lunch. Elena sat by the fireplace, sorting through ledgers when she heard it, the distant roar of an engine outside the iron gates. Unfamiliar, too loud for the village. She stood, alert, peered through the window. A sleek black car, polished, out of place. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, expensive shoes, a coat that didn't belong to these hills. And then the back door opened. He stepped out slowly, his silhouette unmistakable, even after all these years. Daniel, her breath caught. He hadn't aged much, still composed, still sharp, but something about him seemed weathered, thinner maybe, or tired. Elena stepped back from the window as her heart pounded. He had no idea. He didn't know this mansion now belonged to her, that this was her world now. A knock echoed on the front door, loud, firm. She didn't move. Another knock. Then came the voice, deeper, familiar. "Elena." She closed her eyes. "How? Elena, are you home? I know you're here." She slowly stepped toward the door, her hands trembling slightly, but her face remained calm, her spine straight. When she opened the door, the silence between them screamed. He looked at her like he'd seen a ghost. "Elena," his voice faltered. She said nothing. He took a step forward, suddenly unsure of himself. "I didn't know. I thought this place was still part of the Han estate. I had no idea you—" She tilted her head slightly. "Because you never cared to ask." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I didn't mean— This house," she cut in, her voice steady, "was my grandmother's. came to me after her passing. Legally, quietly. You never noticed because you were too busy playing house in my shadow." He swallowed hard. Behind him, a woman stepped out of the car. Younger, stunning, dressed in a crisp white coat and red heels. Lila. Elena's eyes flicked toward her for just a second, then back to Daniel. "So," she said softly, "you've come to reclaim what you gave away?" Daniel looked lost for the first time in years. "Elena, I didn't know. I thought no one lived here anymore. I needed somewhere quiet. Things have been difficult." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You? Difficult?" The sound of tiny feet interrupted them. Hannah ran into the foyer, rubbing her eyes, her curls bouncing. "Yama, where's my drawing? The one with the sun." She stopped, and Daniel froze. The little girl stared up at him, blinking. He stared back. Then Minjae came in holding a toy car. He looked up and paused, followed by Jisoo, who immediately placed himself protectively in front of his siblings. Elena didn't move. Daniel looked at the children, at their eyes, their mouths, their faces. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Are they?" "They're yours," Elena said. "All three." Silence. Lila gasped. "What? Daniel?" Daniel turned to her, stunned. I didn't know. She never told me." Elena's voice cut through like a blade. "Because you never asked. You threw me out without even looking back. I was pregnant when you left me for her." Lila took a step back, her face burning. "Daniel, I didn't know she was..." He ignored her. "Elena." His voice was shaking now. "Why didn't you tell me?" She held her ground. "Because you made it clear I meant nothing. I signed your divorce papers without a fight. I didn't want your money. I didn't want your pity. I didn't want anything from a man who could throw his wife out like she was a piece of used furniture." Daniel looked down, for once, speechless. Behind her, the children watched silently, curious, confused. "Elena," he said finally, "let me at least talk to them, please. I deserve to know them." She shook her head. "You lost that right the day you left. I've been their mother and father, their protector, their anchor. You're a stranger, and I won't let a stranger walk in and claim a place he abandoned." Lila stepped forward, her voice sharp. "We don't need this drama. Daniel, let's just go. This was a mistake." But Daniel didn't move. He looked at his children again, really looked, and something shifted in his eyes. A break in the armor, a flicker of regret. "I didn't know," he said again, softer this time. "I swear if I had known." She stopped him with a glance. "You don't get to rewrite the past." And with that, she stepped back, placed her hand gently on the door, and closed it. Slowly, firmly, on him, on everything they used to be. The silence on the other side was deafening. She leaned against the door for a moment, her heartbeat wild in her chest. Then she turned and picked up Hannah, who looked up at her and asked, "Was that man someone important?" Elena kissed her daughter's cheek. "No," she whispered, "not anymore." But deep in her chest, something had cracked. She replayed every second of Daniel's face at the door, the disbelief in his eyes, the way his voice cracked when he saw the children, the way his mouth moved like he wanted to say more, but didn't. And Lila, God, the look in her eyes, like Elena was nothing but an inconvenience, problem to be solved. The nerve of her, standing on her porch in those glossy red heels, acting like she belonged, acting like this was her life now. Elena stood up and walked barefoot to the hallway. The light from the moon poured through the window, silver and cold. She leaned against the wall and breathed in deeply. She thought she had buried all of it. The pain, the betrayal, the abandonment. But seeing him again had stirred everything back to the surface. She hadn't expected it to hurt this much. Downstairs, a faint creak echoed. She froze. Another step. Her heartbeat picked up. She reached for the bat she kept near the kitchen, just in case. Years of living alone with children had taught her to never assume she was safe. She tiptoed down the stairs, careful not to wake the kids. The front door was open, just slightly. She stepped closer, her breath caught in her throat, until she saw him, Daniel, sitting on the front steps, alone, his elbows on his knees, head hanging low. She almost turned back. Almost, but something stopped her. She opened the door wider, and he turned, startled. He stood up quickly. "Elena," he said, breathless. "I didn't mean to scare you. What are you doing here?" Her voice was ice. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Nervous. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't leave things like that." "You should have," she replied sharply. "It would have been easier for all of us." Daniel looked at her. Really, looked at her. The fire in her eyes. The exhaustion under it. The strength. "You've changed," he murmured. "You're not the same woman I left." She folded her arms, standing in the doorway like a wall he couldn't cross. "No, I'm not. That woman waited for you every night. She lived for your approval. She lost herself trying to keep your world together." Daniel swallowed hard. "I know. I see that now." Elena shook her head slowly. "No, you don't. You think you do. But you have no idea what it was like to wake up alone, to carry 3 lives inside me, not knowing how I would feed them. You have no idea what it means to fight every day, just to survive. To raise children with love when I had none left for myself." He took a step forward. "Let me help now." She didn't move. "You don't get to walk back in and fix what you broke. These children don't know you. They don't need you. But I need them," he said, voice cracking. "I need to know them. Please." She hesitated. He looked desperate. Not just guilty, broken. She let out a shaky breath. "Why are you really here, Daniel?" He ran a hand down his face. "Lila left. A few months ago. She said I wasn't enough anymore. Said I'd grown boring. That my company's fall from the top made me weak." Elena didn't flinch. He went on. "The company, it's not what it used to be. Bad investments, public scandals. People I trusted turned on me. I lost so much. And through it all, I kept thinking about you. About the way you used to look at me like I could do anything." She blinked slowly. "I don't look at you that way anymore." "I know." Silence settled between them again, heavy and unresolved. He looked up at the mansion. "This place, it's beautiful. You rebuilt it." "With my own hands," she said. "Every stone, every crack. I patched it up the same way I did my heart." He smiled faintly. "Of course you did." Elena turned to go back inside, but something in his voice stopped her. "I wanted to come back here with her," he admitted. "I thought it would be a fresh start, a quiet place to escape everything that went wrong. I had no idea it would lead me back to you." She looked over her shoulder. "Funny, that's exactly what I thought the day you left me. That maybe it was the beginning of something better." He looked down, ashamed. Elena's hand hovered on the door. Then she said quietly, "Come back tomorrow, after school. You can meet them properly. But don't bring gifts. Don't try to impress them. Just come as you are. Nothing more." He looked up, eyes wide. "Really? I'm not doing this for you," she warned. "I'm doing it for them. They deserve the truth, not the fantasy of a father you never were." He nodded. "I understand." She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Softly this time. Daniel stood alone on the steps, staring at the door she had once slammed in his face. It had opened again. Not fully, not with forgiveness, but just enough. And that sliver of hope was more than he had any right to ask for. Inside, Elena pressed her forehead against the door and whispered to herself, "Don't fall for the pieces of a man who shattered you once." But deep in her chest, something pulsed. Not love, not yet, but the ache of something unfinished. And that, more than anything, scared her, because she wasn't sure if she was ready to feel again. She had changed her blouse 3 times, pulled her hair back, then let it down, then tied it back again. None of it mattered, she told herself. This wasn't about him. It was about the children. They were home from school, running around the house, laughing. Jisoo had lost a tooth and was showing everyone with great pride. Min-jae was humming to himself while coloring in the living room. Hannah had a crayon in her mouth. Elena crouched down in front of them. "Remember what I told you," she said gently. "There's someone coming today. Someone who—" She hesitated. "Someone important. His name is Daniel." "Like that man from yesterday?" Hannah asked, tilting her head. "Yes," Elena said. Her voice softened. He's your father." They looked at her, confused, curious, but not frightened. "Do we have to call him Dad?" Jisoo asked, his tone serious. "No," she said. "Not unless you want to." The knock came just then. 3 soft taps. Her heart jumped. She stood, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked to the door, each step heavier than the last. When she opened it, Daniel was there, holding a modest bouquet of white daisies. No flashy roses, no designer cologne, just a man in a simple shirt and slacks, his hair slightly tousled by the wind. "I didn't know what kind of flowers you like anymore," he said, "but I remembered you used to stop and look at these whenever we passed them at the park." Elena said nothing. She simply stepped aside, allowing him in. The children peeked from the hallway. Daniel stood still, unsure. "Hi," he said awkwardly, holding up a hand. Well, I guess your mom told you." Min-jae came forward first, clutching a small notebook. "Do you like dinosaurs?" he asked quietly. Daniel blinked. Yeah, I used to. Stegosaurus was my favorite." Min-jae smiled and sat down cross-legged on the floor, flipping to a page full of doodles. Just like that, the wall cracked. Hannah ran up next, grabbed his hand, and stared at his face. "You have eyes like mine," she declared. Daniel laughed, a little choked. "I guess I do." Then came Jisoo. He stood a bit farther back, his arms crossed. "Are you going to stay?" he asked bluntly. Daniel knelt down to his level. "I don't know," he said truthfully. "That's not up to me. But I'd like to be here, if you'll let me." Jisoo didn't answer. He just nodded once and went back to building Legos. Elena watched it all unfold like she was outside of her body. The man who had abandoned her, now kneeling on her wooden floor, smiling at their children like they were his world, felt surreal. Later, she found Daniel in the kitchen, washing dishes without being asked. The sun poured through the windows, catching the silver in his hair she hadn't noticed before. "They're amazing," he said softly. "You did that. You raised them right." She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "You're only seeing the best part. Try sleepless nights, hospital visits, screaming tantrums, fevers at 2 a.m. I would have helped if I'd known. But you didn't want to know," she said, her voice sharper now. "You wanted to be free. You chose her. You packed my things into boxes and told me to leave. You didn't even ask why I was crying. You didn't look at me." He turned off the faucet. Water dripped into the silence. "You're right," he said. "I didn't look. I was selfish, arrogant. I thought I had everything figured out. Lila made me feel powerful again. I thought that was what I needed. And was it?" He looked at her. His eyes were tired, but clearer than she remembered. "No, it was empty. All of it. I lost my company, my reputation, and then she left when things got hard. But the worst part wasn't losing any of that. It was realizing I didn't know what love meant until it was too late." Elena's throat tightened, but she didn't let him see it. "Love doesn't beg," she said. "It doesn't have to prove itself. It stays, even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient." "I know that now." She didn't respond. He stepped a little closer. "I'm not asking for a second chance. I know I don't deserve one, but can I come again? Just to see them, be a part of their world, even just a little?" Elena hesitated. Her instincts screamed to protect the life she'd built. But something in her, something buried and bruised, wanted the children to know him. Not the man who abandoned them, but the one who was trying now. She nodded, slowly. "Once a week," she said. "No more. No overnight stays. No promises you can't keep." "Of course," he said. "Thank you." As she walked him out, the wind picked up, rustling the trees lining the property. Daniel turned to her before stepping into his car. "I never forgot you," he said quietly, "even when I tried to." Elena didn't reply. She closed the door gently. She stood there for a long time, her heart aching in a strange, unfamiliar way. Not like the first time he hurt her. Not anger, not bitterness. Something more dangerous. Hope. And she didn't know yet whether it would save her. He was careful. Too careful. And that caution made Elena uneasy. Not because she feared him, but because the more he tiptoed around her, the more it reminded her of the version of him she used to hope existed. She found herself watching him when he didn't know. The way he knelt to tie Jesus' shoelaces. The way he laughed. A real laugh, not the boardroom smirk she once knew. The way his eyes softened when Hannah leaned on his shoulder and called him Appa for the first time. That moment had wrecked her. She had been in the kitchen, rinsing vegetables, when she heard Hannah's tiny voice echo through the hall. "Appa, look, I draw you and me and Mommy." Daniel's breath had caught. The room went still, and for a second, Elena had pressed a hand against the sink, unable to move. She didn't walk in. She didn't interrupt. She just stood there, trembling. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep that wall up. The children began asking questions, too. Why doesn't Appa live with us? Did he go to the moon when we were babies? Did he forget us and then remember? Elena did her best, always honest, but never cruel. He made mistakes, she told them. Big ones, but he's trying now, and trying matters. She just didn't know how much longer she could try to stay unaffected. Then one Saturday, as she was walking toward the study with a tray of tea, she paused at the living room threshold. Daniel was on the floor, a child on each knee, the third sprawled across his back like a cape. He was laughing, that kind of helpless, breathless laugh that made his eyes crinkle. Her children were glowing, and in that moment, something cracked open inside her. She didn't even realize she was crying until one of the tears hit her wrist. She backed away silently, put the tray on a table, walked out to the garden. The sun was setting, turning the sky orange and pink. And for the first time in years, she didn't know who she was anymore. Because for the last 3 years, she had been mother, fighter, survivor. Now, she was all that and the woman whose heart remembered how it once felt to be loved. Or at least, to want to believe in love again. The door creaked behind her. "Elena!" His voice soft. She didn't turn. "They're waiting for you. I told them I'd be back after helping you carry something." She let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Always the smooth excuses. He stepped beside her, but not too close. "They're happy," he said, eyes on the horizon. "They're children," she replied. "They find joy in anything. They haven't learned how to build walls yet. Then maybe I could learn from them." She looked at him for the first time. His face was open, vulnerable in a way she didn't recognize. "Elena, I don't want to pretend this isn't complicated," he said, "but every time I leave here, it feels like I've stepped out of the only place that makes sense anymore. I think about you, about who you are now. Not the woman I left, the woman who rebuilt everything without me. And I keep wondering if maybe..." She held up her hand. "Don't say it." He closed his mouth, respecting her boundary. "Do you know what I remember the most?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's not the betrayal, not even the night you kicked me out. It's the silence, the months after, when I was carrying them and you never once looked for me. Not a call, not a letter. You were starting a new life, while I was begging mine not to fall apart. I hate myself for that," he whispered. She looked away. "Good. You should." Silence fell between them like fog. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "After a while, I just want to be part of the life you created, however you'll allow." She nodded slowly, emotion tight in her throat. "You can come on Wednesdays now too," she said. "They've been asking, but you still follow my rules." "Of course." She walked past him, pausing only once. "And Daniel?" she added, her voice low but firm. "Don't confuse redemption with affection. This isn't a second chance for us. This is for them. He bowed his head. I understand. But deep in his eyes, there was something else. He hadn't given up. Not yet. And Elena could feel the danger in that. Not because she feared him hurting her again, but because she feared the part of her that wanted to believe he wouldn't. That night, she watched him drive away. The children waved through the window, unaware of the storm quietly brewing in their mother's chest. Elena went to her room, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark. And for the first time in 3 years, she whispered aloud, I don't know what I want anymore. But the wind outside whispered back, as if it already knew, that something was coming. Something that would test every piece of the new life she had fought so hard to build. Elena moved through it all with practiced grace, her hands steady even when her heart wasn't. Because Daniel was coming. Again, the 5th time now. And every visit he made carved something new and dangerous into the rhythm of her days. He was no longer just a visitor from the past. He was slowly becoming part of their now. And she hated that it didn't feel like a threat anymore. Felt natural. She was standing on the porch when she saw the familiar car rolling up the gravel path. Daniel stepped out wearing a soft blue sweater, holding a small potted plant in one hand and a toy robot in the other. For the children, of course. But her eyes lingered for a moment longer than necessary. Not on the gifts, on the way he smiled, the way his shoulders relaxed when he saw her. Elena, he greeted. Still haven't learned boundaries, I see. He held up the plant like a peace offering. It's for the kitchen window. Basil, you mentioned last time your plants keep dying. I said that out of frustration, not as a request, she muttered, taking it anyway. She turned before he could reply, calling out, Kids, your guests here. They came running, throwing themselves at him with unfiltered joy. Hannah immediately grabbed the robot and declared it hers, while Jisoo began explaining his latest school project with dramatic hand gestures. Min-jae took his hand without a word and pulled him toward the living room. And just like that, he belonged. She watched from the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, her stomach twisting with a feeling she couldn't name. Daniel was lying on the carpet, pretending to be a monster, letting the children crawl all over him. Their laughter bounced off the high ceilings of the once quiet mansion. She closed her eyes. There was something dangerous about this kind of peace. Something terrifying, because it couldn't last. Not with the truth still hidden. Later that afternoon, when the children had fallen asleep in a pile of limbs and blankets on the couch, she found him in the garden, alone. He was crouched near the new herb bed, gently placing the basil plant in the soil. You could have just brought chocolate, she said softly. He looked up, smiling. Chocolate doesn't grow. She smirked despite herself. Neither does trust. Daniel stood, brushing the dirt from his hands. Then I'll keep planting, one seed at a time. Her smile faded. You're getting too comfortable. He tilted his head. Would you rather I didn't come? She didn't answer, because she didn't know. He stepped closer, searching her face. You're afraid, aren't you? Her throat tightened. Of what? That I'll hurt you again. She turned away. Don't flatter yourself. Elena. His voice was lower now, serious. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I see you now. Really see you. Not the wife who followed quietly behind. Not the girl who waited for my attention like it was a prize. I see the woman who stood up from ashes and built a kingdom. And I've never admired anyone more. She closed her eyes, fighting the tears that threatened to rise. Words, she whispered. They're easy, but you used to be good with words. You knew how to make lies sound like promises. He stepped behind her, his voice barely audible. Then let me prove it differently. She turned around sharply. And what does that mean? But before he could answer, a voice called from the gate. Elena? Elena Han. Her blood ran cold. She looked up to see a man in a suit approaching, holding a briefcase. Daniel stepped protectively beside her. Yes? She asked, her tone cautious. The man gave a slight bow. Legal affairs. I represent one of Mr. Han's former partners. I believe you've been left certain assets. I'd like to speak with you in private. Daniel looked confused. What are you talking about? Which partner? But Elena already knew. Her grandmother's name. On documents. On land rights. There had been whispers about hidden inheritance matters never resolved. The man opened the briefcase slowly and handed her an envelope. You may want to read this alone. She took it, her fingers trembling. He bowed again and left. Silence. Daniel looked at her. Worry etched into every line of his face. What was that? She didn't answer. Instead, she walked inside the house, the envelope tight in her grip, her breath shallow. She sat at the kitchen table and opened it slowly. And there it was, a hidden clause in her grandmother's estate. A portion of the land she thought was hers wasn't. It had been pledged long ago, in a quiet debt, a secret trust. And now, it belonged to someone else, someone who wanted it back. Daniel had followed her in, watching her closely. Elena, talk to me. She looked up, her voice hollow. We're not safe here anymore. The words dropped like a thunderclap. His jaw tightened. Tell me what's happening. She pushed the papers toward him, her fingers ice cold. He scanned them quickly, his face darkening. This can't be right. But it was. The mansion, their home, the place where she had rebuilt her soul and raised their children, was no longer protected. And worse, the man who now claimed legal rights to it, Daniel's old business rival. Her heart pounded as the truth settled like poison in her chest. This wasn't just about land. It was a warning. Her past, Daniel's past, was clawing its way back. Elena sat at the long kitchen table, the legal documents spread before her like a betrayal written in ink. The air inside the house had grown heavy, still tense, as though the walls themselves were bracing for something to break. Daniel stood at the opposite end of the table, his jaw clenched, his hands resting on the back of a chair he hadn't dared to sit in. This is impossible, he muttered, scanning the papers again. Kong Jin doesn't have the right. That clause is buried in outdated contracts. We can contest this. I have lawyers. Stop, Elena said, her voice hoarse. Just stop. She leaned back, her hand trembling slightly as she pushed the papers away. I rebuilt this home with my bare hands. I brought life back to a place left for dead. And now it's being taken again. And for what? For your past mistakes. Daniel's expression tightened with shame. I didn't know Kong would come after you. He's been circling for years, yes, but I thought... You thought he'd only ruin your life? She snapped, her voice rising for the first time. But he's coming for mine, Daniel. For theirs. And all because you left behind a mess you never cleaned up. He opened his mouth, but she cut him off. This house was all I had. The only proof that I could survive without you. And now... Her voice broke. Now he wants to destroy that, too. Daniel walked around the table, slowly, carefully, as if approaching something wild and wounded. I won't let that happen. You don't get to make promises anymore, she whispered. Elena, he said gently, kneeling beside her chair. I know you don't trust me, but I'm not walking away this time. I'll fight him, with everything I have. And what if everything you have isn't enough? He reached for her hand, and for once, she didn't pull away. Then I'll fail fighting beside you, he said. But I won't let you stand alone. A breath caught in her throat. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. She looked down at him, her eyes tired, but searching. I don't want the children to know. Not yet. He nodded. Of course. Elena stood slowly. I'll put them to bed. Then we talk. Everything. No more secrets. Daniel watched her go, his heart aching with a strange mixture of awe and regret. He had destroyed her once, and yet, here she was still standing, still shielding everyone like a fortress made of fire. Upstairs, Elena tucked the children into bed. Hannah clung to her wrist sleepily. Appa's staying again soon? Maybe, she whispered, stroking her daughter's curls. Would you like that? Hannah nodded, already drifting into dreams. Min-jae mumbled something in his sleep about dinosaurs. Jisoo was already snoring. Elena sat there for a moment, just breathing them in. Their warmth, their innocence, their trust. They didn't know the storm outside wasn't just weather. When she returned downstairs, Daniel was waiting on the couch, 2 mugs of tea untouched between them. He looked at her the way people look at something they never thought they'd hold again. "Talk," she said, sitting down. He did. About Kong Jin. About the deals he'd made out of desperation. About signing over property to keep investors from pulling out. About how he'd buried the contracts thinking they'd never resurface. "I thought I could outrun it all," he said, voice low. "But when the company collapsed, so did the protections. And now it's my home on the line," she said bitterly. He looked away. Yes, they sat in silence, the clock ticking like a metronome between them. "I should have warned you," he added. "When I first saw the property, I should have told you Kong might be watching it." Elena leaned forward, her hands clasped. "I don't want your guilt. I want your plan. What do we do now?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "We buy time. We dispute the claim, stall it. Meanwhile, I reach out to an old contact who knows Kang's weaknesses. The man plays dirty, but so can I." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't want war. But you're in one," he said softly. "Whether you wanted it or not." Her gaze dropped to her hands. "I just wanted peace. You deserve peace." They both sat back, drained. And for the first time in 3 years, Daniel asked her something simple. Something human. "Are you okay?" Elena didn't answer right away. She stared at the dark window, where lightning flashed briefly in the distance. "I don't know," she said honestly. I was finally breathing again, and now it feels like I'm drowning all over." He looked at her. "Then let me hold you up this time." She turned to him slowly. "I don't know if I can believe you. I'll keep showing up until you do." Another flash of lightning lit the room for a second, and in that flicker of brightness, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not love, not yet, but possibility. And possibility was dangerous, because it meant something could still be lost. Outside, the storm crept closer. Inside, hearts once frozen began to tremble. And in the space between silence and thunder, a reckoning waited. She had read the legal claim at least 10 times. Each sentence burned into her memory. Temporary transfer of estate property rights in the event of liquidation or dissolution of assets. The clause was old, buried, and predatory, but legal. The weight of it crushed her chest. Every brick she'd restored, every room she'd painted, every night she'd stayed up feeding babies in the dark. It was all under threat. Now, again. But this time it wasn't just her who could be thrown out. This time it would be her children. A sharp knock at the door made her flinch. She turned to see Daniel standing there, his expression cautious. He wore the same clothes from earlier, his hair a mess, his eyes rimmed with sleepless worry. "I couldn't sleep," he said. She gestured to the papers. "Neither could I." He stepped in, slowly, like he was afraid one wrong move would shatter her. "I made coffee," he offered. "I thought you might—" "I don't want coffee, Daniel," she said sharply. He stopped in his tracks. "I want my life back," she continued, her voice trembling. "I want to stop living in fear that everything I rebuild will be stolen. I want to stop feeling like I'm a guest in my own future." He lowered his gaze. "I know." "No," she snapped, standing suddenly. "You don't know. You don't know what it's like to be humiliated, abandoned, dismissed. You don't know what it's like to watch your child take their first step and have no one to turn to and say, 'Did you see that?' Her hands were shaking now. "You don't know what it's like to be forgotten, to become invisible in someone else's story." "I do know," he said louder now. "Not because I was you, but because I lost you." That stopped her. Daniel's voice softened. "I see it now. Every day I walk into this house, I see the version of you I never knew. And every time the kids call me Appa, it tears me apart, because I didn't earn it." He walked toward her slowly, his voice breaking. "I failed you, in every way. And if I could go back, if I could tell the man I was to shut up and look at you, to see the woman standing right in front of him, I would, but I can't. All I can do now is stand with you and try to undo whatever I still can." Elena's chest rose and fell, her breath uneven. The pain was still there, the grief, but it was sitting beside something else now. The raw, dangerous edge of a question she hadn't dared ask herself until this moment. What if he meant it? A small voice interrupted them. "Mommy!" They both turned to see Hannah standing in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. Elena knelt quickly, gathering her in her arms. "What is it, baby?" "I heard yelling," she whispered. "Is Appa going away again?" Elena blinked, stunned. "No," Daniel said gently, stepping closer. "I'm here, and I'm staying, if it's okay with you." Hannah looked up at her mother. "Can he stay?" Elena nodded slowly. "Just for tonight." Hannah smiled, content, and rested her head on Elena's shoulder. "I'll take her," Daniel said softly. Elena hesitated, then handed Hannah over. She watched as Daniel carried their daughter back to bed, whispering lullabies she used to sing alone. And something in her shifted. Not forgiveness, but recognition of a man trying, truly trying. The next morning, the sunlight felt foreign after such a long night. Elena entered the kitchen to find Daniel already there, frying eggs with Minjae sitting on the counter beside him, offering completely unhelpful advice. When he saw her, Daniel turned down the heat and smiled. "I made breakfast," he said. "I figured the least I could do is start the day with something good." She nodded, too tired to resist. They sat at the table with the children, and for a moment it almost felt normal. But the illusion shattered by afternoon. Elena was walking back from the garden when she saw it. A luxury car parked just beyond the gate, and standing beside it, sunglasses perched on her head, arms crossed with precision, was Lila. The past walked straight into the present, and smiled. "Well," Lila said coolly, "isn't this quaint?" Elena froze. "Why are you here?" Lila stepped forward, heels clicking against the stone path. "You didn't think Kong Jean was going to come for your house without someone on the inside, did you?" Elena's blood ran cold. "You," Lila smirked. "He offered me a seat at the table after Daniel's empire collapsed. Apparently, I make better decisions when I'm not blinded by love." Her words sliced like razors. "You're working for Kong?" Elena whispered. "Oh, sweetie," Lila said, leaning in. "I am Kang's closest advisor now, and we're not just coming for your house. We're coming for everything you think you rebuilt." Elena's heart pounded. "I thought you said you were done with him," she said bitterly. "That he wasn't enough." Lila's smile vanished for a second, then returned sharper than before. "I lied." She stepped back toward the car, lowering her sunglasses. "Tell Daniel I said hello, and goodbye." The engine roared to life, and then she was gone. Elena stood frozen, her fists clenched, her pulse racing, like dangerous fire. The night Daniel left, the first time she saw Lila's name on his phone, the silence that followed her into every room for months. But nothing had prepared her for this. Lila wasn't just a memory anymore. She was a weapon, a storm with a smile. And now she had power, leverage, and motive. Elena walked back to the house like a ghost. Inside, Daniel was laughing with Jisoo over a puzzle on the living room floor, his sleeves rolled up, his eyes soft. He looked up when he saw her, but the smile fell away instantly. "Elena," he said, standing. "What happened?" Her voice came out quiet. "She was here." Daniel blinked. "Who?" She didn't answer, just dropped her gaze to the floor. His voice dropped. "Lila?" Elena nodded once. Daniel stepped closer. "What did she say?" "She's working with Kong Jean," Elena replied, her tone flat. "She's helping him take everything." Daniel's face went pale. "No," he murmured. "No, that can't be. She was outside my gate, Daniel." Her voice cracked. She smiled like she already owns this place. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "I thought she left the country. I thought she was finished with all of this. With me." "Well, apparently," Elena snapped. "She's not finished until I'm in the street with my children watching everything fall apart again." Jisoo peeked up from the floor, sensing the shift. "Mom," Elena swallowed hard and forced a smile. Go upstairs, sweetheart. I'll come tuck you in later. The boy hesitated, then nodded and gathered his siblings. When they were gone, the silence between Elena and Daniel turned sharp. She wants revenge, Elena whispered. Not just on you, on me, for surviving. Daniel sat down on the edge of the couch, hands shaking. I should have seen this coming. You never saw anything coming, she said bitterly. Not when she was circling you. Not when she whispered poison into your ear. Not when she took everything that made you decent and left me nothing but your absence. His eyes lifted to hers, raw and vulnerable. I know. Elena crossed her arms, trying to hold herself together. I should have expected this. I let you back in. I let my guard down. I thought maybe you'd changed. I have changed, he said, standing. But I can't undo her. I can't go back and erase the damage. All I can do is fight now. For you, for them, for this. And what happens if we lose? She asked, voice trembling. Where do I take 3 children when this place is gone? Daniel stepped forward, stopping just in front of her. Then we lose together. She looked up, eyes burning. Don't say that like it's noble, like it's romantic. It's not. It's terrifying. I can't go through it again, Daniel. I can't wake up with my babies in a strange apartment, wondering what happened to the life I built brick by brick. His voice softened. You're not alone this time. She shook her head. You don't understand. You get to lose everything twice. I only got to build once. I don't have another resurrection in me. Daniel reached out, and after a long hesitation, she let him take her hand. Then I'll carry what you can't, he said. Let me be your shield this time. She didn't reply. She couldn't, because deep down, a part of her still didn't believe she'd survive if he failed again. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk long after everyone else had gone to bed. The room dim, the quiet too loud. She opened a drawer and pulled out the old envelope, the one she had never mailed. A letter she had written to him years ago, the night he asked for a divorce. She had poured herself into those pages, crying over every sentence, every line that he never read. It was filled with anger, pain, and love that still bled. She unfolded it now, and her eyes caught on the words she had once written. One day, I will rebuild what you destroyed, but not so you can come back. So I'll never need you again. Her hand trembled, and then she did something she hadn't expected. She left the letter on the kitchen table, where he would find it in the morning, where he would read the truth, not the version she'd let him see, but the one she had buried. When she climbed into bed, she didn't cry. She just stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Please, don't let me be wrong again." In the stillness of the night, the wind howled outside the windows, as if it too feared what tomorrow might bring. Daniel came downstairs early, the way he always did now, hoping to prepare breakfast before the children woke. He never asked, just tried to be useful, tried to be present, tried to earn back a sliver of what he had shattered. He didn't notice the envelope at first. He moved through the room with quiet efficiency, water boiling, eggs cracking, frying pan sizzling. It wasn't until he went to grab a cloth from the center of the table that he saw it. No stamp, no name on the front, just the familiar handwriting. He stared at it for a long time, his chest tightening. Something in him already knew it wasn't new, felt old, heavy, like a sealed past waiting to be confronted. His fingers hovered over it for a moment before he picked it up, gently, like it might disintegrate in his hands. And then he opened it. The first line punched the air from his lungs. You said I made you feel nothing, but I feel everything, and it's killing me. He sat down. The paper trembled in his hands as he kept reading, each word slicing deeper than the last. I begged for you to see me. You didn't look. I spoke, but you didn't hear. So I fell silent, because what else could I do when my presence became a burden? He had to stop. His throat burned, but he kept going. You found someone else, and I told myself that meant you were finally happy. And if you were happy, maybe that made it okay. But I was wrong. You weren't searching for happiness. You were running from the version of yourself you became with me, and you left me holding the broken pieces of a life we built together. Daniel closed his eyes. I wanted to hate you. I tried. But hate is too heavy to carry when your body is already tired from holding life. Your children kicked inside me while I cried, and still I found a way to love them. Fiercely, completely, even though they reminded me of you. A tear slid down his cheek. One day, I will rebuild what you destroyed, but not so you can come back. So I'll never need you again. The letter ended there. No signature, no goodbye, just the echo of a love that had been burned alive and buried with bare hands. He sat there for what felt like hours, unmoving, the letter resting against his knee, the sun now climbing higher, warm against his face. Unearned. Footsteps on the stairs. He didn't look up. Elena, he said softly, his voice hoarse. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her face unreadable. You found it. He nodded once. You weren't meant to, she added. I know, he whispered, but I'm glad I did. She didn't move. Daniel stood slowly, folding the letter with care, as if folding a piece of her soul. I don't deserve to be in this house, he said. Not after what I did. Not after what you went through. She didn't reply. He looked at her, his eyes red, voice trembling. But I want to say this anyway. I was a coward. I mistook silence for peace. I mistook loyalty for weakness. And I didn't see you. Not really. Not the way I should have. Elena's jaw tightened, her eyes shining. And now, he said, I see everything, and I hate the man I was. I hate that you were alone when you needed someone most. That I let you bleed in the dark just so I could chase some shallow reflection of love. He took a shaky breath. I know saying sorry doesn't fix it, but I am. For every second you felt invisible. For every night you slept with tears on your pillow. For walking away when I should have stayed. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't want you to find the letter because I didn't want to give you more of me. I'm not here to take more, he said. I'm here to give back what I can, even if it's just being the man our children deserve. The room fell silent again. Then a soft voice from the stairs. Mommy? Why are you crying? It was Minjae. Elena quickly wiped her cheeks. Just tired, honey. Daniel turned, kneeling. Come here, buddy. Minjae ran into his arms without hesitation. I had a dream, he said, curling into Daniel's chest. That we all lived here, together, and nobody took it away. Daniel met Elena's gaze across the room. I'll do whatever it takes, he said, to make sure that dream stays safe. She looked at her son, so small, so trusting. Then she looked at the man who once shattered her, and was now standing in the ruins, trying to build something with her again. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said quietly, but I see you trying, and I won't stop you. A nod, a fragile truce. Outside, the wind had calmed. The sky held back its storms, just for now. But inside them both, a different kind of storm rumbled, not made of destruction, but of possibility. Hi, sharp. Hannah's voice. Mommy! Elena dropped the clothes and ran. She found Hannah on the floor in the living room, clutching her little stomach, her face pale and soaked with sweat. Her breathing was shallow, fast, too fast. Daniel rushed in just behind her. What happened? I don't know, Elena stammered. She was just playing. Hannah whimpered, curling into herself. It hurts. Mommy, it really hurts. Elena's heart clenched. Something was wrong. This wasn't a scraped knee or a tantrum. This was real. Daniel, get the car. Now! She scooped Hannah into her arms, feeling the heat of her skin, the way her little hands gripped Elena's blouse. Her daughter's eyes fluttered, scared and glazed. It's okay, baby. I'm here. I'm here. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Red lights, fast turns, Hannah's breathing growing weaker in the back seat. Elena didn't even realize she was praying until she heard herself whisper, over and over, please, please, not her, not now. Daniel stayed silent, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on the road. When they arrived, nurses took Hannah from her arms almost immediately. Elena followed down the hallway until a doctor gently stopped her. "We'll take care of her," he said calmly. "Just wait here." The door closed, and then silence. Elena collapsed into a chair, her chest heaving. Daniel sat beside her, but she didn't look at him. Couldn't. Her hands were shaking too hard. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "I can't lose her. I can't." Daniel reached for her hand. She didn't pull away this time. "She's strong," he said. "Like you." Elena turned her face toward the white hospital walls, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I don't know what I'd do without her." "You won't have to find out," he whispered. Hours passed. Minutes dragged. Time twisted. Minjae and Jisoo had been picked up by a neighbor Elena trusted. She hadn't wanted them to see their sister like that. Finally, a doctor emerged. "She's stable," he said. "There was an internal infection we didn't catch earlier. We'll keep her under observation, but she's resting now." Elena stood immediately. "Can I see her?" He nodded. Daniel stayed in the hall while Elena entered the room. Hannah lay small and quiet in the bed, a white blanket pulled up to her chin, and 4 in her arm. Her eyes fluttered open when Elena sat beside her. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice dry. Elena smiled through the tears. "You scared me." Hannah blinked slowly. "Did I do something bad?" Elena shook her head. "No, you got tired. Your body needed help. But you're okay now." Hannah tried to lift her hand. Elena caught it gently and pressed it to her lips. "I stayed," Hannah murmured. "Like you always say to do when things are scary. I stayed." That broke something in Elena. She bent forward, resting her forehead gently against her daughter's tiny hand. "Yes, you stayed. And I'm so proud of you." Outside the room, Daniel stood looking through the glass panel, watching the woman he once lost and the child he never knew he needed. And in that moment, he made a silent vow. No matter what Kang Jin or Lila did, no matter how many battles came for them, he would never walk away again. He couldn't change the past, but maybe, just maybe, he could help protect what remained of the future. When Elena stepped back into the hallway, her face was pale but steadier. "She's resting," she said, "but the doctor wants her here for at least 2 days." "I'll stay," Daniel said without hesitation. "I'll sleep in the waiting room if I have to." Elena looked at him, really looked at him. "You mean that?" "I mean it." And for the first time, she nodded. Not reluctantly, not out of exhaustion, but because some part of her believed him. Even if the world outside was crumbling, even if tomorrow brought new wars. Tonight, in this sterile hallway filled with cold light and the smell of antiseptic, she wasn't alone. And that somehow made all the difference. But just when it felt like they could breathe, the air changed again. It began with a phone vibrating against the plastic waiting room table. Daniel picked it up absent-mindedly, expecting a message from the boys or Elena's neighbor. Instead, his face drained of all color as he read the notification. Then came the second message, and a third. "Elena," he called, barely able to speak. "You need to see this." She stepped out of Hannah's room, her hair tied in a loose braid, eyes still tired from the night before. "What is it?" He held the phone out. "Lila went public." She blinked. "What?" He handed her the device, his voice hollow. "She's everywhere. Look." Elena stared at the screen. A glossy video played on a news platform. Lila, perfectly styled, seated in front of soft lighting, speaking in a low, calm voice. "After everything I went through," Lila said, her eyes shining with controlled emotion, "I couldn't stay silent. I was cast aside by a man I loved, left with nothing, while he returned to the woman who humiliated me, in a property that legally belongs to someone else. I want the truth known, not for revenge, but for justice." The anchor's voice followed. "Lila Moon, former partner of disgraced CEO Daniel Han, has broken her silence in an exclusive interview revealing shocking details of betrayal, stolen property, and emotional abuse." Elena stopped the video. Her hands trembled. She's painting me as a villain, she whispered. She's turning this into a public trial. Daniel rubbed his temples, pacing. She knows we're vulnerable. She waited until we were here, until you were distracted. Elena's heart pounded in her chest. The court hearing. It's in 3 days. This is all part of it, isn't it? She's creating a narrative. If she wins the public, the court will follow. He nodded slowly. She's always been calculating. Elena stared at the wall, her jaw clenched. No, this isn't just about the property anymore. She's coming for me, my reputation, my motherhood. She wants to destroy me. Daniel's fists curled at his sides. She won't. But even as he said it, the doubt in his voice betrayed him. An hour later, Elena's phone began to ring. Unknown numbers, reporters, online outlets, headlines spreading like fire. Daniel Hahn's ex-wife accused of inheritance fraud, mystery mansion. Was it ever hers? Lila Moon speaks out, betrayed and broken by power couple. By the time they returned home the next evening, photographers were waiting by the gate. Flashing cameras, shouted questions, microphones shoved through the bars. Miss Kim, care to comment? Elena, did you lie to the court? Are you and Mr. Hahn back together? Was Lila ever part of the plan? Daniel stepped in front of her, shielding her body with his own as they made their way inside. Get off our property, he shouted. Elena didn't say a word until the door closed behind them. She leaned against it, her knees weak. She's going to take everything, she said quietly. Not just the land. She's going to turn the whole world against me. No, Daniel said. Not if we speak first. Elena looked at him. What are you talking about? You have a voice. Use it. Show them the truth. She shook her head. I didn't build this life to be famous. I don't want my children dragged into a media circus. You don't have a choice anymore, he said. If you stay silent, she controls the story. She stepped back, covering her face with her hands. This isn't who I am. It is now, he said softly. You didn't ask for this war, but it's here, and I'll fight it beside you. But you have to stand up, Elena, like you did when I left you, like you did when you had nothing. Don't let her rewrite the story you bled for. The next morning, Elena stood in front of her mirror in silence. She wore a simple navy blouse, no makeup, her hair tied in a clean bun. She didn't want glamour. She wanted truth. Daniel stood beside her at the edge of the frame. He reached out and touched her wrist gently. You ready? She nodded once. A press statement was recorded in the old drawing room, the one she had restored with her own hands. She sat on a chair she had reupholstered herself. Behind her, the soft white walls that once held nothing but decay. The camera rolled. My name is Elena Kim, she began, voice steady. I'm a mother of 3. I was abandoned by my husband 3 years ago, and I rebuilt my life piece by piece. The mansion you see in the news wasn't stolen. It was my grandmother's. Her hands built it. Mine restored it. My children have lived here since the day they were born. She paused, breathing through the lump in her throat. I never asked for attention. I never wanted the spotlight. But I will not let lies define me. I won't let someone who watched me fall come back just to destroy me when I finally stood up again. The video went viral within hours. Comments flooded in. She speaks with grace. Lila's story doesn't add up anymore. Elena is what strength looks like. But the war was far from over. Late that night, a letter arrived under the gate. No stamp, no return address. Elena opened it slowly, her fingers cold. Inside was a single sentence, typed in bold. See you in court. And on every screen, no signature, but she knew who sent it. And as she stared out at the gate beyond the shadows, she knew the next move wasn't hers. You look like yourself, he'd whispered as he tied the delicate clasp of her watch. That's all you ever need to be. But now, under the gray, flickering lights of the corridor, Elena didn't feel like herself. She felt like a target. You don't have to go through with this, Daniel said softly beside her, as though he could feel the war behind her stillness. She turned to him. Her eyes were clear, But beneath the surface, something burned. "I do," she replied, "because if I stay silent now, she wins everything I fought for." The bailiff opened the doors. "Ms. Kim, they're ready." Elena inhaled once, slowly, then stepped inside. The room was packed. Media representatives, lawyers, curious onlookers. Even a few cameras allowed in under limited agreement. The judge sat tall at the front, flanked by 2 clerks. And across the aisle, there she was, Lila, elegant, unshaken, wearing a deep, red suit with lipstick to match. She looked like someone already certain of her victory. She smiled slightly as Elena entered. Not wide, just enough to be seen. Daniel sat behind Elena, his hands clenched together. He didn't look at Lila, not even once. The opening statements were as expected. Lila's lawyer painted her as the forgotten partner, the woman left behind after pouring her energy into Daniel's rise, and who now had her emotional and financial investments stolen by Elena, the former spouse conveniently hidden behind a curtain of sympathy. When Elena took the stand, the air changed. She sat with her spine straight, voice quiet, but steady. "I didn't steal anything," she began. "What I have was earned through blood, pain, and silence. I didn't ask for the spotlight. I didn't ask for the war. But I will not be erased from my own story." Lila's lawyer stood, expression smug. "Ms. Kim, you claim emotional hardship. But would you say that you've benefited quite substantially from your ex-husband's fall? The mansion, public attention, even rebuilding your public image on his collapse." Elena blinked slowly. "I benefited from surviving," she said. "If that's a crime, then I accept the sentence." A quiet murmur rippled through the courtroom. The lawyer tilted his head. "But isn't it true that your presence in the Han estate created significant tension between Mr. Han and Ms. Moon? That you returned to the property just as Ms. Moon and Mr. Han were discussing long-term residence?" "No," Elena replied. "I never returned. I was never gone. That was my home, my children's home, and I stayed. Long after everyone else left." Lila's expression twitched. Elena saw it. A crack, small, but there. And then Lila stood. She requested to address the court directly. The judge allowed it. She walked slowly to the front, her heels sharp against the floor. "I loved Daniel," she said, voice controlled. "I stood by him when his company collapsed. I helped him survive the storm, and in return, he disappeared into the arms of the woman who had already broken him." Elena narrowed her eyes. Lila turned, as if she were speaking to the room, but her gaze stayed fixed on Elena. "I don't believe Ms. Kim is malicious. I believe she is manipulative. The kind of woman who pretends to be fragile while orchestrating power behind soft smiles. She used her children, her name, even her grandmother's death, all to reclaim a man she let fall into another woman's arms." Gasped, cameras flashing. The judge banged the gavel. "Order." Elena didn't flinch. She waited, let the noise settle, let the performance breathe. Then slowly, she stood again. "If I had power then," she said softly, "he would have stayed. If I had control, I wouldn't have cried in silence while being thrown out. If I had manipulation in me, I wouldn't have begged him with my eyes to stay, only for him to look away." Her voice rose now. "I didn't fight then, but I'm fighting now. Not for him, not even for the house, but for the version of me that lost everything and still chose to get up and raise 3 children alone." Lila turned sharply. "You think this makes you noble? You're no better than me. You waited until I was gone to crawl back into his arms." Elena didn't move, didn't blink. "I didn't crawl back anywhere," she said. "He found me standing." Daniel stood too, his voice loud, unwavering. "She never asked for me to come back. I did that on my own. And I would do it again." The room erupted. Lila's face darkened. For the first time, she looked shaken. The judge called for recess. Elena walked out of the courtroom, her legs steady despite the adrenaline crashing through her. She reached the hallway and exhaled long, deep. Daniel followed. "You were incredible," he said. "I wasn't trying to be," she replied. "I just told the truth." He stepped closer. That's what made it powerful. She looked up at him. You know she's not done, right? I know, he said, but neither are we. And for the first time in days, she believed it. The war wasn't over, but the tide had begun to turn. And Lila, for all her games, had just shown her first real crack. Elena stood by the water fountain, sipping slowly, her hands still trembling from the heat of her testimony. Her pulse was only just beginning to settle. She was alone, or so she thought. A soft click of heels echoed behind her. Measured, confident. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Lila. Elena took another sip, then slowly straightened and faced her. You didn't have to go that far, she said quietly, dragging my children into it, turning everything into a circus. Lila tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Oh, please, you think this is about your children? This was always about you, and me, and the man you thought you could get back. I didn't try to get him back, Elena said, her voice calm. He came because you weren't who he thought you were. Lila laughed, short and bitter. No, he came because he wanted comfort. That's all you are to him. Familiar comfort in a collapsing life. You're his last safety net, Elena, not his love story. Elena's jaw tightened. Say whatever you need to justify this war, but I know who I am now, and nothing you say changes that. Lila's gaze flickered, the first sign of real emotion behind her mask. Not rage, not superiority, wounded pride. You think I don't know what it felt like? Lila said, her voice suddenly quieter, but sharper. To be second? To pour everything into a man and still feel like you're wearing someone else's shoes every time he looks at you? Like you'll never be enough because some invisible memory still owns him. Elena blinked. For a moment, the courtroom, the trial, the noise, it all fell away. Lila stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. I waited for him to forget you. I gave him everything: power, access, support, even when he started slipping. I told myself you were the past. But every time he looked at me, I could feel it. You were still there, somewhere in the back of his mind. And I hated you for it. Elena stared at her. The words felt surreal, like she was hearing the echo of a confession that had been trapped in another life. You destroyed me because you envied the part of me that stayed with him, Elena said. Even when I was gone. Lila's lips trembled for half a second. Then she straightened. I didn't destroy you. You were already broken. I just didn't see the point in pretending to help someone who wouldn't get up on her own. But I did get up, Elena said. Without him, without you, without anyone. And that's what really bothers you, isn't it? Lila's eyes darkened. You think this is over because you gave a pretty speech? Elena didn't flinch. I think it's over because the truth is louder than your lies. And this time, people are listening. A long silence stretched between them. Then Lila stepped back, the smug edge slowly returning to her voice. You'll never be the woman I am, Elena. No, Elena said. I'll never have to be. And with that, she turned and walked away, her heart pounding in her chest. Not from fear, but from the feeling of finally standing taller than the pain. Daniel was waiting down the hall. When he saw her, he stood immediately. What happened? Elena paused beside him, her voice steady. She's not as strong as she wants to be. He searched her face. And you? Elena looked him in the eyes, truly looked at him. I'm stronger than I thought. Daniel nodded, swallowing the emotion in his throat. You always were. Outside, clouds began to roll in again. But this time, Elena didn't dread the storm. Elena sat on the back porch with a blanket draped over her shoulders. The wind was cool, the stars above unbothered by everything happening below. She sipped tea slowly, feeling her bones ache with the weight of the last few days. But it wasn't exhaustion that filled her. It was something heavier. Daniel stepped out onto the porch behind her. He didn't speak right away. He just stood there, watching her silhouette outlined against the garden lights. Finally, he asked, "May I sit?" She nodded. He sat beside her, close but not touching. They were quiet for a long time. The only sound between them was the gentle clinking of her spoon inside the mug. Then Daniel exhaled. "I've been thinking," he said, "about everything I left behind, and why I left it." Elena didn't respond, but she listened, every word. "I used to tell myself it was because we fell out of love," he continued, "that we grew apart, that you stopped seeing me, but that wasn't the truth. That was just the lie that hurt less." She finally turned her head slightly toward him. Daniel stared ahead. His voice was low and careful, like he wasn't sure how to say what needed to be said. "The truth is, I didn't leave you because you changed. I left because you didn't." Her brows furrowed, confusion flickering in her eyes. "You stayed kind," he said. "You stayed calm, patient, even when I was losing control. And I couldn't handle that. I couldn't handle how good you were when I was starting to hate who I was." He looked at her now, and there was no defense in his face, no pride. "I envied you," he said. "You loved me when I didn't deserve it, and that made me feel small, weak. So I found someone who made me feel powerful instead. Not loved, just important. And I mistook that for something real." A tear slipped down Elena's cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away quickly, but her silence told him everything. "I thought being a man meant never needing anyone," he whispered. "But the truth is, I always needed you, and I ran because I couldn't bear to face what I was becoming. So I let you carry everything. I let you bleed alone." Elena finally spoke, her voice soft and trembling. "And now," he looked at her, "now I'm not asking for anything. Not your forgiveness, not your heart. I just wanted you to know that I finally saw it. All of it. And I'll spend the rest of my life, whether beside you or not, honoring what I once destroyed." Her breath caught in her throat. The pain she'd buried, the love she'd silenced, all cracked through the wall she'd built. "I wanted you to say that," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I wanted to hear it, for so long." He reached out, slow and hesitant, resting his hand gently over hers. "You deserved to hear it a long time ago." Elena looked down at their hands, the familiarity of his touch, and the distance that still lived between them. "I don't know if I can love you again," she said honestly. "Not like before, that version of us. It's gone." "I know," he replied, "and I don't want what we had. I want what could be real now, if there's even the smallest part of you that thinks it's possible." She turned her face to him. Her eyes were clear, full of grief and strength. "There's a part of me," she said slowly, "that still flinches when you walk into the room, that remembers the sound of the door closing when you left. That part, it still hurts." Daniel nodded, not daring to speak. "But there's another part," she continued, voice trembling, "that watches you tie Minji's shoelaces and reads bedtime stories with all the wrong voices. And I wonder what would have happened if you had stayed." He smiled sadly. "Maybe this is us staying now, not erasing what came before, but choosing something better this time." She didn't answer right away. She just leaned her head gently against his shoulder. They sat like that in silence for a long time. The wind whispered through the trees. The stars above seemed to hold their breath. Daniel closed his eyes and let himself feel the weight of her against him. Not as a victory, not as a return, but as something fragile, earned, not yet fully his. And as Elena sat with her cheek pressed to the man who had once been her undoing, she realized something terrifying and beautiful. She no longer hated him, and she didn't know what would come next. But whatever it was, it would begin from truth. From ruin, yes, but also from something new. Daniel stood beside her, close but not touching, his expression unreadable. Neither of them spoke on the way inside. Inside the courtroom, the air was sharp. Lila sat at her table, legs crossed, her expression calm, but her fingers tapped, ever so slightly, against the arm of her chair. She wore white today, as if to declare her innocence. The judge entered, his robe billowing behind him like the wind before a storm. "All parties present?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyers answered in unison. The judge cleared his throat and began reading the decision. The words blurred together at first. Legal terminology, citations, clause references. Elena heard none of it, only the pounding of her heartbeat. Until, based on the documentation submitted, the court recognizes that the disputed estate was lawfully transferred to Elena Kim through the inheritance of Ms. Jean A.E. Kim, with no direct breach of contract found in relation to the contested property agreements initiated by Mr. Daniel Hahn. Lila's jaw tightened. Elena blinked, stunned. She leaned forward slightly, needing to hear it again. The court therefore rules in favor of the defendant. The property known as 187 Willowgate, the Kim estate, remains the sole legal possession of Elena Kim. Gasps rippled through the gallery. But it didn't end there. The judge continued, however, in regard to the slander claims and public damage resulting from recent media activity, this court finds that deliberate defamation occurred. The plaintiff, Lila Moon, is ordered to pay damages, along with issuing a formal public apology within 7 days of this verdict. The silence that followed was electric. Lila's mouth opened, stunned. Her lawyer stood quickly to object, but the judge raised a hand. This court has made its ruling. You may appeal, but the damage to the defendant's reputation is documented. The lies, intentional. Lila stood. Your Honor, The judge cut her off. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck. And just like that, it was over. Elena sat frozen. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed. Outside, the courthouse steps were filled with reporters, microphones, cameras. But Elena didn't stop for any of them. She walked down the steps slowly, the wind tugging at her coat. Daniel followed behind her like a shadow. When they reached the car, he opened the door for her. She paused before getting in. Did you know? She asked. He looked at her. Know what? She narrowed her eyes. About the second clause. About the private settlement you offered behind my back. He hesitated just for a second, then nodded. I did. Elena felt her breath catch. You were willing to give up everything. I already had, he said. That house, you, the children. I had already lost the most important things. I didn't care about the property. I just wanted you to win, even if it meant losing everything else. She stared at him, her throat tight. I didn't ask for you to protect me, she whispered. I know, he said, but I wanted to, because that's what I should have done years ago. Tears welled in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't about being the hero. It was about being the man who finally stood behind you. Silently, steadily, whether you saw it or not. She stepped closer, her voice shaking. You were willing to lose the last thing you had left. I already lost it when I walked out of our life, he said. Everything since then has just been my way of trying to be worthy again. The words shattered her. She couldn't hold it back anymore. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Not tightly, not desperately, but with quiet grief and quiet hope. Daniel stood still, then held her back, gently, like she might disappear again. They stayed there for a long moment, the world around them spinning. She whispered against his chest. You don't owe me anything anymore. I know, he said, but I still want to give you everything. The cameras flashed in the distance. The reporters called their names, but they didn't answer, not with words, because some victories aren't loud. They're quiet, held between two people who finally stopped running, and finally stayed. The sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor, the same floor she had scrubbed with blistered hands after the first storm years ago. Now it was warm again. Still, her fingers trembled as she clutched the old envelope in her hand. It was blank. No address, no name, just paper and ink and all the words she had buried. Behind her, Daniel entered quietly. He paused when he saw her holding the letter. You're really going to do it? He asked. She didn't look at him. Her eyes remained on the twins. I need to, she whispered. For myself. He stepped closer. Do you want me to stay? She shook her head gently. I think this part, I need to do alone. Daniel nodded once and walked back down the hallway. He didn't ask again. Elena sat at the table, opened the envelope, and pulled out a fresh page. Her hand hovered over it. Her heart pounded. And then she began to write. "Dear me, I know you don't want to open this. I know your hands are shaking just holding the paper. But I need you to listen, because for the first time, I am writing from peace, not pain. I remember the woman you were. I remember how you fell to your knees the day he walked out. How you begged the sky to give you something, anything that would make the ache stop. You held your belly, already feeling the life inside you, and you asked yourself how you would raise them alone. You sat in the bathtub in silence, night after night, pretending not to cry so the walls wouldn't echo it back at you. You blamed yourself, over and over. You thought maybe if you had loved him better, worn your hair differently, been less quiet, smiled more, he would have stayed. But I need you to know this now. It was never your fault. He left because he was drowning and he thought you were a mirror. But you weren't. You were a lighthouse. And lighthouses can't save the ship. They can only shine. You did more than survive. You turned an empty house into a home. You gave birth to 3 hearts that beat because yours refused to stop. You rebuilt your name, not with noise, but with quiet strength. You stood in court with the woman who tried to erase you, and you didn't flinch. And maybe most terrifying of all, you forgave him. Not because he deserved it, but because you refused to let your love turn into poison. You still remember the pain, the silence, the long nights. But now, when you wake up, there's laughter in the hallway. There are footprints beside yours. There is peace, even in the memory of the war. So I'm writing this not to say goodbye to the past, but to finally tell that woman, the one who thought she wasn't enough. You were. You always were. Elena set the pen down. Her shoulders shook. Not from grief this time, but from release. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, and she let them fall. Daniel returned quietly, holding a mug of tea. He placed it beside her, not saying a word. She turned to him, eyes red but clear. "I think I can breathe again," she said. He smiled gently. "Then let's make space for more of that." She reached for his hand, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. And for the first time in years, they stood together as equals. There was no promise of perfection, no guarantee of forever, but there was honesty, and that was finally enough. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the walls gold, Elena slipped the letter into a wooden box and locked it. Not to forget, but to remember. She placed it on the highest shelf, beside a framed photo of her grandmother, and whispered, "I did it." And her house, was quiet again. Elena was on the living room floor with the children. They were painting, fingers covered in blues and yellows, laughter echoing through the house. Daniel sat on the armchair, watching them with a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Not when they were babies, not even before he left. It was Minjae who asked it. He looked up, brushing a strand of hair out of his paint-streaked face, and said in that small, matter-of-fact voice only a child can have, "Are you and Appa going to be married again?" The world paused. Elena froze, brush midair. Daniel blinked. Slowly, Gina and Sua stopped what they were doing, their curious eyes darting from their brother to their parents. It wasn't asked with hope or fear, just a child's honesty, but it shook the ground under them like thunder. Elena swallowed. She didn't look at Daniel. Not yet. She wiped her hands on a cloth and leaned toward her son. "Why do you ask that, baby?" Minjae shrugged. "Because Appa sleeps here now, and he makes breakfast with you. And when you smile at each other, your eyes look the same." Her lips parted, the truth catching somewhere between breath and silence. Daniel stood slowly. His hands were trembling. "Elena!" She looked at him now, and the moment stretched like an open field. He stepped toward her, carefully, not rushing it. "I don't want to confuse them," he said. "Or you. I haven't earned the right to ask for anything more. But if there's even a part of you that can imagine it, I want you to know I'd marry you again, tomorrow, or in 50 years, or never. If you asked me to just stay like this, I'd stay. No ring, no label, just yours." The room was silent except for the soft ticking of the old clock. The children looked at their mother, wide-eyed, waiting for an answer they didn't even fully understand. Elena stood. She walked toward him slowly, her face unreadable. And then, without a word, she reached out and took his hand. She held it like someone who had lost something once and knew exactly how precious it was now. "You broke me," she said softly, "and I rebuilt myself without waiting for you." He nodded, pain flickering behind his eyes. "I know. But now," she continued, "I'm not saying yes because I need you. I'm saying yes because I choose you." He closed his eyes, the weight of it hitting him like wind through the trees. And when he opened them, they were glassy. "You're saying yes?" "I'm saying we can try," she whispered. "Not because we owe it to the past, but because maybe we deserve a different ending." He pulled her close, but not with desperation, with reverence, and the children cheered, even though they didn't fully understand. Their joy was pure. Gina threw her arms around their legs, and Sua began spinning in circles with paint still on her fingers. Minjae beamed. "Does this mean we'll have cake?" Daniel laughed through the tears. "Yes, kiddo. The biggest one we can find." Later that night, after the kids were asleep and the stars blinked softly above the house, Elena stood by the open window. Daniel joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist. They said nothing, because some stories don't end with declarations. They end with the quiet knowledge that something broken can still be beautiful. That healing isn't loud.